Hi, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome once again to the Gildarie Freddie Kissoon show. We also coming to you on YouTube. You could get it there on the Guyanese Critic page or Daybreak News TBN. I want to say just 4 days before Christmas, this year is galloped towards the end, and we're hoping that we're going to have a wonderful year next year. But as usual, we have a very important guest tonight. I want to cut to the chase because as we talk about our country, the development of this country, we have to talk about the character of our leaders. We have to talk about what they're doing, what they've done, the decisions they've taken, the decisions they've made, and some of the policies that they're about to make. Tonight we have in the studio one of the most important persons in this country. The office that he holds right now represents almost 218,000 voters thereabouts. Very important numbers when you look at the People's Progressive Party civic in power, 235 according to the figures. You would know that these figures are important in the whole scheme of things. Large block of figures, and it's not representative of the entire population because we have over, according to some figures, 800,000 persons. I'm going to say good night to my co-host Freddie Kissoon. He's going to do the honors of introducing our guest here tonight. Very important person. And over the next hour, or maybe if we have to go a little further than that, we're going to wade you through some of the things that we should know about his policies, about some of his actions, and where he wants to see Guyana. Freddie Kissoon, good night to you, sir.
Good evening. I am not going to go through the banality of introducing our guest because the whole country knows the opposition leader. This is somebody I have known for decades. I want to start in an unusual way. I will do away with protocol because I don't think I have the mental energy to refer to Aubrey as Mr. Norton. We know each other well long ago, so I think I'm comfortable with Aubrey, and I think he would understand the dropping of the protocol. But I want to ask him a very important favor this evening because I want to do something in an interview program that I don't think is normally done. And because I want to do this thing, we have requested extra time. So I'm kindly asking Aubrey for his patience. And our guest, my co-host Gildarie. My first question is not really a question. It's the adumbration of a theory of class struggle in which I'm putting Aubrey Norton in the middle of this theory. When I'm finished outlining the theory, it will conclude with two alternatives. Either Aubrey destroys himself in the coming years, or either he achieves greatness. That is what the theory is about. I will ask both my co-hosts and Aubrey to bear up with me because I will go beyond more than 5 minutes. A little bit over 5 minutes. Now, I start with my theory and I will wait to see how Aubrey reacts to that theory. Here we go. When Guyana went into the modern world, the mulatto class and the Creole class, both middle class, felt that they were the natural inheritors of post-colonial Caribbean. And so an entitlement mentality was born. The mulatto, I will say mulatto and Creoles rather than calling out the whole name. The mulattoes and the Creoles belong to the same class identity. The only difference between the two is color. The mulattoes and the Creole are both westernized people, both middle class, both classes feel that they are superior to other classes culturally in the country. The difference with the Creole middle class and the mulatto middle class is color. The Creole middle class also consists of black people. And that would be Yu Chumley, the father of categories of the AFC. He was an extremely dark person, but he was one of the quintessential member of the Creole middle class. And I think we have the light complexion mulatto class. Because of their entitlement, they founded a party to bring them to power. That party was under John Carter, a lawyer called National Democratic Party. The mulattoes and the Creoles were also uncertain about their positions vis-a-vis other parties, particularly the PPP under Burnham and Jagan. And so they sent over some of the numbers to the PPP, Martin Carter, Rory Westmus. It so turned out when we had the first franchise, the first election, Jagan and Burnham won, but Jagan and Burnham split. The Creole and the mulatto felt that the way of survival was for their party, the NDP under John Carter, to merge with Burnham's PNC because Carter didn't have the numbers. And so a merger took place. And Mr. Burnham won the government. He defeated the ethnic community that the Creoles in the middle class do not want to see rule this country, the Indians, for cultural reasons. I wouldn't call it racist reasons. Other theorists may say, if you don't want the Indians in power, then you're racist. But the Creole, the mulattoes in the Creole had a devastating trauma when Burnham defected from the agenda and brought in a lot of working class leaders, Hamilton Green, Robert Jordan, and he went in directions that the Creoles and the mulattoes rejected. So the mulattoes and the Creoles founded another NDP, this time called the Working People's Alliance, a party replete with mulattoes and Creoles to replace Burnham. It so happened Burnham defeated the WPA, and much to their chagrin, they took a low profile. When Burnham died, the Creoles and the mulattoes had a resurrection in Desmond Hoyt. In fact, Hoyt brought in a lot of Creoles and middle class into his leadership. Hoyt died, and a not so clear complexion working class man from Linden became the head of the PNC, Robert Corbin. And the mulattoes and the Creoles rejected Corbin. I know from personal knowledge that they denuded Corbin of resources. So what they did to undermine Corbin, they formed another middle class party called the Alliance for Change, with a typical mulatto Creole citizen, Raphael Trotman. Then the denouement was attained. The climax was reached. Corbin surrendered to the mulattoes and the Creoles, literally surrendered when the AFC devastated him and took 5 or 6 seats from him in the elections. So Corbin threw in his lot with the Creole middle class. He manipulated the congressional vote so that a choice that the mulattoes and the Creoles didn't want, Carl Greenwich, the campaign manager for Greenwich was Aubrey Norton. And so a typical mulatto won the PNC leadership, David Granger. And the PNC now had become the servant of the Creole and the mulattoes. And in Nassau, Bahamas, Granger and Raphael Trotman plotted the resurrection of power for the mulattoes and the Creoles. And they won that power in 2015. It so happened as in 1992, when the dialectics was to Hoyt's disadvantage and he lost power, the dialectics was against Granger and he lost power. And so we have Another dark-skinned working-class leader of the PNC, coincidentally from not in a fancy area of Guyana, again, Linden. I am postulating that the mulattoes and the Creoles are going to treat Norton the way they treated Corbin. I am contending that they don't like him, they despise him the way they despise Corbin. And they're going to do two things to Norton. They're either going to resurrect the AFC with someone like Trotman, maybe Dominic Gaskin, or they're going to seek Western Embassy's help in birthing another middle-class party. And so we come to 1994, not the 1984, not the 1984 of George Orwell, the 1984 of Hobbs Burnham and Cheddi Jagan. It was a seminal year in the history of Guyana in which Burnham and Jagan began to pursue class solidarity to the erosion of ethnic competition. The talks were going on in 1984 for this class solidarity, which will find expression in a joint government. But Mr. Burnham died. And so we are still with 1984 in the form of a Jaganite president, Irfan Ali, and the Burnham in the form of Aubrey Norton. I'm talking about class position now. I believe that Irfan Ali has the resources and intend to use the resources in a way to elevate working class people with the intention of reaching out to the constituencies of the PNC. And I think he's been reaching out to PNC constituencies. That poses a problem for Aubrey Norton, but it does not have to be a problem. Norton now could go back to 1984 and seek class solidarity with President Ali. In other words, form an alliance to push Ali to satisfy Norton's consistency, to bring things, to bring resources to the African people that they never had before. I think Ali is going to do it, and I think Norton has no alternative but to make that great leap and form an alliance with Ali, but putting his agenda to Ali and say, this is 1984 Jagan and Burnham, you cannot, if you renege from what I have on my agenda, there's going to be a problem. If Norton does that, I think we reach what Francis Fukuyama, and Norton would know what I'm talking about, we will have reached the end of history. I would like to hear Aubrey's response to that.
I'll start where you ended. When Jagan was in charge of the PPP, he was in control of the PPP. Burnham was in control of the PNC. I'm not so sure Ali is in control of the PPP. And to that extent, I don't know that he has the power to do what you're talking about. Contextually, if one goes to what happened with Robert Corbin, first of all, I think your analysis was very straight-lined. History doesn't run in a straight line. It has a way of going in all directions, but I want to go to Robert Corbin. Robert Corbin agreed through a third party to become involved in what was called constructive engagement. And in that process, an agreement was signed. When that agreement was signed, the person that undermined it and destroyed it was Barry Jack Doe. Barry Jack Doe contended then that Mrs. Jagan didn't want it. And so he reneged on the agreement. Many of us concluded it couldn't be Mrs. Jagan, but it was the nature of Barry Jack Doe, because when Mrs. Jagan commented on the withholding of advertisement to the Stabrook News. Jagdo's response was that she was a private citizen and basically she should mind her own business. So in my opinion, and those who will do any analysis of an intellectual nature would recognize that she was scapegoated rather than, and the big dilemma I think for Irfan Ali is that he's in office but he's not in power, and therefore the configuration of 1985 doesn't exist. I also want to point out to you that you seem to have put everything in the sole context of class and race and color, but you left out that it was the Cold War, and a lot of what happened in the context of the Cold War. If one recognized that there was this intense battle between East and West, and a lot of what happened, for instance, the birthing of the AFC, I do not think it's just a question of the mulattoes. Let us go back. The international community was seeking a third force, and there were people from a rep from the PNC, a rep from the PPP, and one from the WP. When I was General Secretary at the point when it started, and I was one who decided that I was not going to get into that. Raphael Trotman then replaced me and went, I think, on that Fletcher course. So that a lot of what emerged as the AFC was really the design of international forces to create a third force on the assumption that the third force will hold the counterbalance and break the back of what they perceive to be the two dinosaurs, the PPP and the PNC. Now, I'm therefore suggesting that the mulatto analysis is flawed. It is true that the mulattoes played a significant role in terms of Guyana. It is true that color played a significant role. But sometimes I think we over-attribute things to the mulattoes, etc. Now, Burnham himself, I don't know if in your analysis you consider him to be mulatto.
No.
No. Well, then the theory falls to the ground in the sense that Burnham was the son of a school teacher who, Rice, had exceptional oratory skills.
I put him in the Creole middle class, not the mulatto middle class.
All right. Well,
he wasn't very light complexion.
So your definition of mulatto is
the very light complexion.
The very light
African.
complexion. Now Burnham, in this regard, is considered a Creole middle class with these oratory skills, and I think Burnham was able to rally ordinary people to the cause he espoused. And in this regard, the mulattoes that you talk about was in a constant battle with Burnham. Let us not forget that when Burnham came to power, fair-skinned people worked in the banks, in all of those positions, and Burnham was instrumental in ensuring he broke down those barriers, so people regardless of color. Mind you, do you see a role for fair Indians in this analysis? Because there is a view that fair Indians, based on the historical evolution of the caste system in India, hold similar positions and views to the mulattoes on the African side. But your theory seems to spin around this color paradigm that is linked to the Africans but not linked to the Indians.
I could explain that.
No, hold a minute.
Go on, yeah, sure.
Hold a minute. And then we have to fit in the indigenous people, the Amerindians, because the analysis seemed to suggest that the only two forces are the PPP, the PNC, or the Indian and the blacks. But the Amerindians at present hold a kind of a balance of power in Guyana. I'm saying all this to say to you, it is very difficult to analyze Guyana using just class and color. It's class, it's color, it's race, there are international variables. What happened after Burnham's death was not solely a function of the mulatto class. And let me expose on that a little. Before Burnham's death, Burnham had instructed his ambassadors to begin a rapprochement with the West because of the problems Burnham was experiencing. It is true that Dr. Jagan and Forbes Burnham were talking, but that in itself aroused suspicion in the West. Do not forget that the minute Burnham died, the United States dispatched Sally Cowell, who was an undersecretary, to speak with Desmond Hoyt. And Ghana started to move in a liberal democratic direction. And one of the key actors in that was the international community. And so I don't see that as a function of the re-emergence of the middle class. I see it as in the context of the Cold War. Solidarity emerging between Burnham and Jagan, the United States particularly dissatisfied. The United States took the opportunity the minute Forbes Burnham passed away to virtually indicate the direction they think Guyana should go. And in some regard, Desmond Hoyt obliged. Now, even in your analysis about when Hamilton Green and them came in, it's not totally true. Hamilton Green was there from the inception of the party, and he was like the first and youngest general secretary under Burnham. So in terms of where you fit Hamilton Green in, Hamilton Green was always there. I now come to Robert Corbin. Robert Corbin needs to be given a little more credit than he sometimes gets. Robert Corbin pushed for coalition politics at his own expense. Let us recall that even in the discussions with the WPA, when some were suggesting that the time was right for an Indian leading the party, Robert Corbin at the time said he was prepared to give way to Murray.
Winston Murray.
Winston Murray. The WP, as I understood it, and this one is a very complex one because you're hearing different views, it was said that it was never communicated to the WPA by the person who should have communicated it, that Robert Corbin was prepared to accept Winston Murray. And so that era, I think, is a complex era, but my own position here is this. Your analysis of what should happen now, in my opinion, is eminently flawed because Irfan Ali doesn't wield the power to come to the table and say this is what will happen. And if you're going to talk about that kind of action, I want to point out, when I became opposition leader, I said a number of things that I am prepared to put on the table, including dealing with ethnic discrimination and a number of other things, and discuss it with the People's Progressive Party. Unfortunately, Irfan Ali either didn't respond or was not allowed to respond, and the person who responded was Barra Jackdew. In my opinion, the biggest barrier to any form of ethnic unity at this stage is Barra Jack Dew. And so, while I hear you, I don't agree that the conditions of 2022 are the same conditions of 1984. I want to say this to you. I believe that we have to solve the ethnic problem. But I do not see solving the ethnic problem as just a mere compromise between two political parties, because it will not deal with the systemic problems that we have to deal with. There are a number of problems we have to deal with. Whether you like it or not, both political parties came out of a kind of an authoritarian culture. None of them were liberal Democrats. They were political parties, the PPP claiming communism, the PNC claiming socialism. And at the time, you did not have a situation in which both subscribed to a democratic culture. So the first problem that we have to deal with is the political culture. The political culture in Guyana has to become one in which there is scope for compromise and consensus, with the objective being solving the problems of Guyana. I also don't like the comparison with the Dr. Jagan era, because Dr. Jagan came over as committed to the working class people. The PPP in the post-Jagan era never gave any indication that it is committed to the working class. Its emasculation of GAU and NASI that are PPP unions is indicative of it. Its entire approach in terms of resource allocation. In fact, under the PPP, an elite has gotten extremely rich, while the mass of Guyanese continue to punish. And I put the second variable. I cannot see myself being involved in a unity movement unless it has on the agenda a serious attempt to eradicate poverty. It is one thing to go in an African Guyanese community and say you're giving this and you're giving that. That cannot deal with poverty. If you look at the countries that would have dealt with poverty, what you see is a study of poverty and then structured measures aimed at dealing with poverty. We're not seeing that in Guyana. We're seeing in Guyana the use of resources from oil and political power for political domination and control. I think Ramkaran was correct when he pointed out that at the end of this process of giving and trying to win black communities, the PPP wouldn't succeed. Yes, there are going to be a few people who enjoy what is there to be enjoyed, but it is not an approach that can deal with the systemic problems of poverty and bring people out of poverty. And so any attempt to unify cannot be just the PPP and
the leader of the PNC, that I think it's, forgive me, Freddie, was it about 30% of the votes that he got? 32%. Are you in charge of the PNC? I start with that first.
Let me deal with this. First of all, in any election, whether it's in the party or out, you will have the people eligible to vote. Now, when Vincent Alexander said there were 3,000 persons eligible, it turned out when the actual final figures were true, you had only about 2,000 delegates rather than 3,000. I have gotten well over 87% of that, and therefore I think I have a mandate. But you know what I find most interesting? I was elected by 1,772 persons, and people raised questions as to whether I'm in charge of the party. Irfan Ali became the presidential candidate for the PPP with 35 people voting for him. If then one is talking about popularity in the party, then the person that should be questioned about popularity is Irfan. It is well known that many people, many PPP members wanted alternative candidates, but 35 people sat down under the guidance and direction of Barra Jackdale, and Irfan Ali emerged. I have no problem with what process the PPP want, but I believe it is not the best thing to question the legitimacy of a man who has been elected by more than 1,000 people in his party against a man who has been elected by 35.
Freddie, you have a follow-up on that?
Yeah, I don't want to go back into history, but since we requested extra time, maybe I could get in a few things. Yes, I think the light complexion Indians, in fact, when the PPP split, some very wealthy Indians went over to the PNC. We had the son of Jainarayan Singh on this table here. So
And
you
Lakshman
have,
Singh as well.
right. I believe the light complexion, non-Hindu, non-Muslim Indians have a problem with dark-skinned Indians, have a problem with rural, with leaders from the PPP coming from the rural peasantry, the rural proletariat. But I think the problem with clay complexion Indians is that the African Guyanese in general never gave them a chance to come over to the mulatto and the Creole class because there was this barrier of religion. To many mulattoes in Creole, this Hindu religion is not as suave, not as sane, not as philosophically saccharine as Christianity. So whereas the light complexion Indians and the rich Indians would have liked to be part of the Creole, and I still think lots of them admire the red people and their education, but systematic, because of the religion, also cultural styles, how they dressed, what have you. The Creole and the mulattoes had this condescending attitude to them, because quite a number of clay complexion Indians adhere to the religion, Islam and Hindu Dharma. The second factor that I think pushed those clay complexion Indians into the bosom of the PPP, a leadership that they wouldn't like because of color and class, is that from 1961, there have been systematic violence on Indian people, which Indian people in totality blame on African leaders. Now, I don't want to get into the 60s, because the 60s, I know you're going to reply and say tit for tat. I know you're going to reply and say...
That wouldn't be my reply.
I know there's this thing about the 60s need to be looked at more objectively. But let's start from 92. 92 election, 97 election, 2001 election, the Buxton Mayhem, and we come now to Cotton Tree, September 2020. We come a few months ago to what happened in Monrepo. I am saying these factors do not allow the clay complexion Indians to settle into the middle class of mulattoes and Creole, because there have been systematic violence against Indian people that Indian people perceive is instigated by African leaders.
You know, I want to tell you something, Freddie. The violence that occur, which I don't agree with, there is still need to explain why is it the Abraham family were killed.
But I didn't go to the 60s.
No, no.
I left out the 60s.
But I left out the 60s. If you're doing the evolution of violence, you have to run it in a systematic and structured way to understand from it how this violence emerged. The violence in this society are rooted in a number of things. One, perceptions. Two, the very fact of lower class people, particularly poor Africans, not seeing themselves as not getting what they are supposed to get. In more recent times, it has become more pronounced. But I believe that when one looks at violence, one has to look at the role of the business class in violence. Because violence cannot be sustained by poor people on their own. And when you look at what happened in Georgetown, I want to submit to you that there is enough evidence that the wealthy use a lot of dispossessed people to promote violence. And I want to say to you this: violence in Guyana did not occur by Africans alone. I want to point out to you, when, I remember his name just now, Ali was his surname, left the PPP and exposed the violence the PPP was perpetrating in the society, he was murdered. And it is well documented. Let me point out some other things to you. There has been a mechanism in this society to paint Africans in a particular way. Like the falsehood that 3,000 people died in Linden in some so-called Wisma massacre. When you go and read the report, 4 people did not die. Go and read the report on
What about massive rapes and massive
that is very much linked. That is very much linked to some of the pronouncements in Ravidev papers. But I want you to remember this. This commission wasn't set up by the PNC. It was set up by the PPP. It was an independent commission. Nowhere in that report did they talk about widespread rape. I was a little 6-year-old boy in Linden, and I remember black people protecting Indians in Linden. And so sometimes we go as if this is this Indian and this is black. We know, for instance, Vincent Adams will tell you that his mother was Indian, lived in Linden, and she was protected and actually sent out. No, I'm not saying that there are no guilty blacks. What I'm saying is that both races are guilty. And as we seek to resolve these issues,
some the Guyanese
and Quran is very profound in that pamphlet. Mm-hmm. You know, if you want to do serious analysis of race in Guyana, you can't put race by itself. Like I said, it's race, it's class, and do not run away from the fact that in the very caste system you're talking about, dark Indians and Indians generally are suppressed.
But could an Indian listening to this analysis coming from you, and they're over 60, that in 1992, I was on the street with the deputy editor of the Catholic Standard in 1992 when they were destruction, attack on Indian business places. Now, are you disputing that from 92, the 97 election, you had a problem, widespread violence, PPP, reign was cut short by 2 years. Then we come to 2001. Then we come to the mayhem in Buxton. Are you going to collapse those events into a political theory of tit for tat? When it's a matter on the salt of elections and results.
The mayhem in Buxton was a function of drugs. It was a function of police lawlessness. It was a function of the wealthy utilizing criminals. Let me say this to you. I have been involved in this political struggle, and I've seen cases where businessmen ask protesters to burn the property for insurance reasons. I'm not saying to you is in 97 there was violence. I can tell you this.
2001.
No, hold a minute. 97, let me tell you what happened. We had on our list an Indian lawyer, I don't remember his name now. He's a judge. He went to the Caribbean. And somebody saw him and beat him up. And he came and Desmond Height and I were in the office. And we said, it's unfortunate, etc. Now, I don't know that the PNC has anything to benefit from beating Indians. In fact, I am being criticized now for not being in protest because I don't want Indians beaten. Now, I'm saying to you, Freddie.
From within the party?
Well, if you follow Facebook, you will see people overseas all about.
They want you to protest.
But I'm saying this to you. The Buxton story is not a story we must take in isolation from the breakdown in law and order in Guyana, the domination and control of the police by drug lords. I can tell you where young men come and tell you that the so-called Black Close Squad will take them, put them past a police blockade, put them to rob people, and then when they rob people, and somebody said, the news said, is 1 million loss. And then they go to the young men and say, how you saying it's 100,000? And many of them were killed like that. The underclass in this country in that period was used in the pursuit of people in illegalities objectives. I'm not saying by any chance there wasn't violence. There was. But it was also linked to the political economy of this country. And when we look at it, we must not look at it solely as political party violence. Because, like I said, I don't want to get into the tit for tat. There's evidence that the PPP was involved in political party, in political violence. Today, I'm telling you this, today, I went to Kanji to bury a party comrade, an Indian party comrade husband. The woman name is Marlon Garib. The PPP supporters consistently beat her, pelt her house down, do all kinds of things. And some of us believe it contributed to her husband's death. Many people we made complaints to the police, etc. I'm saying to you that it is not a simple, straightforward thing, in which I know of cases where the PPP put people to beat Indians.
If it's a case of criminality that people are taking advantage, that political parties are taking advantage, a little earlier you said...
No, they're political parties alone. I said the drug establishment among others,
right.
Not just political parties.
All right. So, do we have an ethnic problem in this country, or is it something that needs to be solved, or are they being created? It's figment of imagination, and political party are just using 1-2 people, and it's been distorted, and stories are being told that there's widespread discrimination and racialism in this country. Your thoughts on that? Because you also said that Indians and blacks, they commingle, they play dominoes. Well, I say that. Do we have a racial problem in this country?
Yes, we do have an ethnic problem. We do have an ethnic problem. But our ethnic problem spins around certain things. One, many people, including me, I had said, and would say it again, I had prepared to live with the sanctions of the international community than to live 5 years with the People's Progressive Party. And when the People's Progressive Party came to power, they didn't attempt...
It's talking 2020?
Yeah, 2020.
Okay.
They didn't attempt to change their approach to governance so you can feel comfortable. Everything that they did and are doing, these things are indicative of a mindset. The government doesn't like you to talk about discrimination, but I must speak about discrimination. I go into African Guyanese communities. When I went to Little Africa, they went after and they did a few things. I think it was so bad that they decided to do some streets, etc. I've consistently pointed out, Freddie, and do believe Barry Jackdo announced that when they come to power, anybody who got land after the no confidence motion and under the AP and UAFC, they will take it back. They will carry them to court. I'm inviting you, or all who say there is no discrimination, to show me the list of the people who they tackled on this issue. And all of them were African Guyanese. Be it savants, the people who got lands at...
That's not true. I happen to have investigated some of those cases.
And could you tell me which one?
I will tell you, Danny Saw from Windsor Estate is one of them. A lot of them were Indians.
No. Shh. You're saying to me that they got the land under the AP and UAFC.
Yep.
And then when they are going to now repossess or put them before the court, they did it to Indians?
Some of them voluntarily give up those lands. No. Am I reading you wrong?
Yeah.
You're saying that the majority of people whose lands were taken away, or that the PPP says that they were going to go after. This particular case I'm very familiar with because we were looking at all those NISA lands that were given out when I was at Kaitra News. And so I happen to know because Windsor Estate and a whole bunch of others, even some of the lands across, I think it's Wales, where the people say it.
There is an Indian man at Wales,
right,
and I said this publicly, where they attempted to take his land, and he is one who resisted. I'm on public record with him saying that. But I'm saying to you, most, if not all, of the people that they went after and ended up in court were African Guyanese. Including Eslin Shockley, who's do humanitarian work and got a land legally. People went to court, and the court ruled that they got the land legally, and they still go after them.
Aubrey, I think that outline has a counter to it, and in this respect, you bear some responsibility. although I believe at the time when you became Empowerment of Youth, when the 2015 election, you had far more theoretical understanding of politics than both Rafa Chotman and David Granger. I'm not talking about the AFC because I don't think he had that kind of intellectual capacity at the time in 2015. But on this program, if someone is looking at you from Afghanistan or from Iceland and they don't know the situation, in 2015, the very things that we are lamenting now, the PNC, they were the majority. They had a hegemony rather than the other parties in the APNU and AFC.
I'm listening.
They were the arrest in charge of the directorship of GBTI. There were charges in arrest of land allocation at Pradoville. And one can go on and listen.
Sorry, could I stop you?
Yeah, okay.
When the AP and UFC came to power, they had audits done. And it was based on audits, these charges were made. I'm saying to you that this government comes to power. Today, I went to court with Carol Smith Joseph. And here is what I will show you the prosecutor, the lawyer that appeared for Suku said.
Oh, yes.
Here what the lawyer says. We'll finish the investigation and asking for time. Now you lay 14 charges against a woman and you haven't completed the investigation. I sat at the back of the court and the magistrate asking, you know what, you understand what you're telling me? How could you? I will never ever compare what happened in 2015. Christopher Ram and them did audits. Based on those audits, charges were leveled. Now, I'm saying to you that this government comes to power. As far as I know, there have been no audits. They are just charging people as they feel they should charge. And 2 years on, they can't have a proper hearing in a court of law. No.
But the APNU did that.
What
special prosecutors you?
I'm saying yes. I'm saying to you, Freddie. I'm saying to you, yes. The APNU charged people. I'm saying the significant difference is the APNU AFC invested in audits, and based on the results of the audit, charges were laid. I don't know of any case where the APNU charge people and then go to tell a magistrate or a judge, we'll finish the investigation, but you already, and there have been numerous cases of this since the PPP is in government, where they charge people.
No, that happened on the APNU. Many times the special prosecutors were...
I want to split up.
I'm not saying there was no special prosecutor. I'm saying there was no case in which people were charged and then the court was told, we'll finish the investigation, like what is happening. That's all I'm saying to you.
Mr. Norton, a few months back, a group attempted to have a discussion on apartheid in Guyana. Your thoughts on apartheid in Guyana?
Well, like I said at the very conference, apartheid in terms of the geographical separateness.
Apartheid, and for me, is in inverted commas. I have my views on that.
Hold on. Apartheid, as in South Africa, involves separateness. Blacks live separate place, white people live separate, etc. And like we have said, there is no separateness, but the same philosophy of domination and control, the same racism that underpins apartheid apartheid is what is operative. Look, I've given people practical example. Freddie, I'm in the quarantine. And people say to you, oh, farmers get 250,000 flood relief, livage relief. I then leave the quarantine and go into the country within the same region 6, in which African Guyanese farmer lost heads of cattle, and they were told they can't get more than $50,000. Now, I don't know what factor or what variables one can look at to see that in the same region, people got more damages, but in the PPP constituencies, the money ranging from 250,000 to 8 million. And then when you go to Barakara, you tell them 50,000, nothing more. If somebody could come up with other explanations outside the race, I'm prepared to accept it.
The use of the word apartheid?
No. I'm saying to you, get my position.
Right.
I do not believe there's separateness in the case of South Africa, but I'm saying philosophically, the same racism that underpins apartheid is operative in Guyana. I'll give you
That's a terrifying statement to make, and it should be confronted.
But let me finish. I want to say this to you and ask the question: how is it in Guyana you can say to, mind you, I believe Indo-Guyanese have a right to have the areas regularized. So the comment I'm going to make, I want to make that clear. You go to Pigeon Island, you say to the community there, to your support base, we're going to regularize Pigeon Island. And then you coming up the road, the new road that is built. You first told the African Guyanese there, they are in the way of the road. It turned out they are not in the way of the road. And that along that very road, a lot of PPP supporters got lands. But then when you meet Mocha, you say to the people there, you have to move. We need 250 feet on both sides. When right along the shortcoming all the time, you are leaving people. And you're saying to them now, you can't regularize them. But you will go to Pigeon Island and say, we'll regularize you. Let's come to the new Demerara Bridge. Freddie, we must live in the real world. You're going to build a new Demerara, a new bridge over the Demerara River. You're going to affect a group of African Guyanese in the area. And hear what you said to them. We have no compensation to give you. But when you were building the Berbice Bridge, and mind you, I genuinely believe the people who were in the way of the Berbice Bridge, they were right to move them, and they were right to compensate them. What I'm questioning now is why, if you did that there, what else could be the rationale for you not compensating properly the people who you're going to move for the Demerara Bridge go? What outside of racism will you use?
Well, Aubrey, I don't have assembly in front of me. These outlines, I make a distinction between fact, they didn't say facts, I say these outlines. You're the opposition leader. I believe the opposition leader has to bat for his political positions. I find it hard to accept, as somebody that is 72 years of age and lived all my life in this country, I find it hard to accept, from Jagan in 57, then Burning from 64, that you have Indian and African leaders who are patronized by different ethnic groups, live among ethnic groups, and could perpetuate a system of discrimination that is so deliberate, so mentally disturbing, that we are talking about a very, very... I don't accept that. I don't accept the systematic...
I'm trying to get what you're accepting.
There are black village there.
I'm trying to get...
We want to build a road there. But,
Freddie, Jagger announced that he's doing 282 roads in Region 6.
You talk about systematic. I know some of these people. I don't know them that well. But I know there's
and what happened on New Market Street. At Monrepo, the PPP support base annoyed, and I think they had a right to be annoyed in the sense that they weren't consulted in what the government was doing. The breakup are where they had to break up. Now, having broken them up, the minister goes, he meets them, negotiate with them and find settlement. I have no problem with that. I believe people who govern in a society should engage constituents and seek to resolve issues in a civilized way. But having seen the PPP support base destroy property at Monrepo, the government goes in, negotiate with them, find solutions. They charge no one. You come now to New Market Street, where you're not prepared to negotiate. You send out a letter saying, I want you moved in 7 days. And then you choose Christmas time, when these people have to mind their families. And I went out there and hear what they said. When I met the people, they said to me, they said they're coming back tomorrow. And I said to them then, look, I know the PPP, they're coming tonight. I said, they're coming tonight. They were thing, but they decided they'd stay. I left, I think, about 11 o'clock and went in. The PPP went that night. The mayor put himself in the way. He has destroyed no property. You charge him for obstruction of traffic. He made a comment which I think is part of free speech. I didn't think it was a racist comment, but he's charged under the Cybercrime Act. Well, not one person from Monrepo is charged. No, I don't believe any side should have been charged. I believe the matter should have been dealt with in a civilized way. And while you might want to see it isn't structured racism, at the end of the day, the results that it produces is manifest racism. And we live in a multi-ethnic society, Freddie. And unless we can find solutions in which all our people are involved and all our people will benefit, Guyana will always have difficulties.
But Aubrey, I wanted to get back to that apartheid thing. Mm-hmm. The TV does not have efficacy when you look at what apartheid was.
I said that,
but even applying it to Guyana, Aubrey, one of the myths I believe growing up, well, I would say after I became a university student and started to study sociology, history, CVC, there is a myth in this country about poverty, and there's a perpetual, relentless propagation of the theory about black people being disenfranchised. Well, no, black people not being given resources, not being taken care of in the economy of Guyana. I think the myth is we look at 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40 very rich Indian people and we see where they live. There is widespread poverty among Indians.
But I said that way to you.
But no, but the way the promulgation of the apartheid theory is if there is an inexorable drive against black people when it can look. Let me articulate the rejection of the apartheid theory. Apartheid could only succeed if there are two vehicles mounted against an ethnic group, and that is state hegemony and that is denial of resources because of racist ideological endowments. The person is endowed with racist ideology. State hegemony in Guyana is not dominated by Indians. They are...
What do you mean? No, we gotta get in definition. What do you mean by state hegemony?
The state has an assemblage of power. The state apparatus.
Correct.
And who is in the hand of an ethnic group. And this hegemony, this ocean of power is directed against an enemy ethnic community.
Could you use...
That is not...
Could you use the resource allocation in our budget and show me how it is that resource allocation in the budget seeks to empower African Guyanese and not create an environment of domination and control?
Well, the resource of the... You see, the key variable here is Africans, and empower Africans. Why are you singling out Africans when they are the mixed race, the Amerindians, and a whole school of poor impoverished Indians could claim that the budget...
Freddie, if I was speaking tonight to how I intend dealing with the issue, since I've been leading the opposition, I've been always talking about a people-centered strategy for development in which we focus on all people. Freddie, I am well aware, I go into Indian community, I was a bush lot, and poor Indians complain that one PPP man with all the power broke up the road, do them anything. And I came back and raised it on television. I know that there is poverty in the Amerindian community. I know there is poverty in the African Guyanese community. I know there is poverty in the Indian Guyanese community. But what I'm saying, without fear of contradiction, Freddie, is that there are elements in the PPP who seek to dominate and control. And in the process, the African community faces the blunt and the brunt of it. And whether you call it apartheid or not, it doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is I live in a country that is a multi-ethnic society. I live in a country in which I believe all our people should benefit from our resources. But I live in a country in which that is not happening. For instance, if you look at the procurement laws in this country, only the rich will do well.
We're talking class now.
But I remember it is I said to you this.
I wanted to say thank God, but I'm not a believer.
No, I did say to you that it is class, it is race, it is geography. I did outline those factors.
I watch
it has a class.
I watch the time in my mango pelter. We've gone about that. We requested extra time. I want to get
I want to tell
him we coming to AFC.
Look, I'm prepared to come back, you know.
You're going to come back. No.
I'm prepared to come back.
It is not
no problem.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me say this. It is very good that we have...
No, we're going on.
Freddie Kissoon. Mr. Ab, it's good that we have the leader of the opposition. These are people who represent us, not only in parliament, but big blocks of voters in this country. And I think it is very not brave, not courageous, but it is his responsibility also to speak to everybody, even those who criticize him. And I think everybody knows that when you come here, you're going to be sitting in the seat. I want to come straight to the question. Let's don't beat around the bush. On the road to 2025, Mr. Norton, I presume that you want to lead the PNC to victory. Now, what have you done in terms of making the party more diversified in terms of race? I asked this question in the context that somebody asked me to ask you this. Geeta Chandan, no longer the GS. I think Ganesh Mahipal removed from the PS, from the PSC. Well, I'm putting the question to you. Amna Ali out of the picture.
The treasurer just resigned. The Indian treasurer just resigned.
I don't know who's in the treasurer.
He just
Fayez
resigned.
Morsalin.
Right. Have you been able to track the Indian, the Amerindians? Tell us a little about that, and maybe you could address this particular instance.
First of all, I would say to you that sometimes people put everything in an ethnic context. The person who appointed Geeta Chandan name was Aubrey Norton. When I appointed Geeta, I made it very clear that I think she has administrative skills and would like to use it. The issues that emerged, Geeta decided she would resign. Marceline said to me that he continues to work with the party, but he's resigning as treasurer. Now, we brought in one of the young Indians that came in under me is Riaz Rupnarain, which is the first time, and I can say to you at present, I have a good relationship with Natasha Singh, I have a good relationship with Ganesh Mahipal. Now, you mentioned Amna Ali. I didn't put Amna Ali out the party. Amna Ali was the general secretary. When I won, Amna Ali chose not to come back to Congress Place. I am the leader of the party. If there is a matter that involves Amna Ali, I up the phone and call her and speak to her. Because I think, but I want to remind people this. When a lot of people were saying no to Winston Murray as an Indian leading the party, I was in the forefront of campaigning for him. And I think that should signal that if I believe that an Indian in the PNC could have led the party and then go on to election, then I cannot have a battle with Indians. It is unfortunate that once you represent a case, you're seen as racist. But I came out of communities and represented matters for Indo-Guyanese, and I see no problem with Indo-Guyanese. I see no problem with Amerindian. Marvin Williams was not as active in the party. He came back and is very active, while
Barnabas Charles took a dig at you. He said he was appointed advisor, and he was okay to have advisors. He said that publicly.
Listen to me. I don't want to get into the issue with Barnabas Charles, but I can tell you, many people call me and advise me. Many people. It's like, you come to the Freddie Kissoon Gildarie show. People say, don't come. You talk with some people, they say, I think you should come for these reasons. I will then sit down and look at what people tell me, and I made the decision that I'm coming.
Thank you very much for that.
Now, I'm saying this to say to you, when people are advising you, they have to understand that their task is to put a number of propositions, and you as the leader have got to sit and make the decisions, because in the final analysis...
So we can't see you return his calls.
Listen to me. I'll tell this to you, Freddie. And without... It has nothing to do with Burnham. Hear what it has to do with. Richard Van West Charles could have always anytime walk in Congress Place. And you ask anybody in Congress Place if they have to make appointments to see the leader. Suddenly Richard started to say you getting appointments to see me, when there was never a case of appointments. Richard Van was just up the phone and called me. I said we meet by your house. And this is after I became leader.
Gildarie, can I get in something here?
So,
Go ahead.
You could watch me in my eyes. I have watched you for so long. I remember an incident with J.O.F. Haynes as your lecturer.
yes, I remember the incident.
J.O.F. Haynes said to me, I want to change his grade. This guy has a fine analytical mind. And I did not, he came to me because he felt I would object. You wanted to change your grade from a B to A. I said, go ahead. He has a fine analytical mind. You could watch me in my eyes and tell me that 45,000 people in 2020 voted for the Alliance for Change, even when it is what at its charismatic apogee, it couldn't get 45,000.
How we get here?
What you mean?
No, we end up here.
No, I'm getting it. Okay, right. Now, the AFC is going to sit down in Parliament as the AFC party, forget about me, and have 9 seats. I'm putting it to you that there should be a compromise, that you should say to them, you can't have 9 seats if you're going on your own. Let's split some of these seats. Some should come to the PNC, because I'm telling you now, I am putting my credibility in the line here. I'm saying as a political analyst, I believe PNC voters in substantial numbers are among those 45,000 that the AFC got. Therefore, I'm saying you have a moral obligation to those PNC voters among those 45,000 to say we will split the numbers. The AFC goes in 10 days' time, the AFC is gone. They will sit in Parliament as a party in the AFC. I'm saying to you, should there not be a split in the allocation of the 9 seats? I was saying going to the PNC.
I will say this to you. I will meet with the AFC. I will listen to the AFC's position. The AFC has not formally said to me they are going anyway. They're talking in the press. When the AFC says to me formally they're going somewhere, then we have to talk. I will then talk with people in the PNC, and based on my advice from the people in the PNC, I will make the decision with my party. But let me say this to you. A lot of times it's not solely numbers. You know, as a political scientist, that in politics, deals are made to achieve objectives. And sometimes in making a deal, you give so you can get. And so, while I hear you, I have not arrived at the conclusion that there is some automaticity in terms of what I should do with the AFC when they go, if they claim they go. I believe, let me close it by saying, I believe I have an obligation as a leader to speak with the AFC, speak with the AFC leadership, speak with the party leadership, and then we decide how we move forward.
For clarity's sake, I think some legal minds have indicated that you as leader, and maybe I want to branch off a little, who has the power for the opposition right now to recall a parliament deal? Let's start there first.
The right of recall rests in the party.
In the party,
yes,
not David Granger.
No, what the law says is essentially the right of recall rests in the party. Once the party could meet out and establish that they would have lost confidence in a particular person, then the party informs the representative of the list.
And then you're the representative of the party?
No, the representative of the list is Mr. Granger.
Oh.
I am the leader of the party and the leader of the coalition. So once there is someone...
So if Granger refuses, Mr. Granger refuses...
I'm one of the person who like to live in a positive line. Up until now, he has not refused anything.
Let's assume he refuses. He doesn't do anything. What happens then?
You know, when I was a little while at school, I was once told, assume sometime could mean making an ass of you and me. I don't want to assume at this stage. This is a real life situation. Whenever the situation emerges, I am prepared to do what is required as a political leader, engage Mr. Granger. And because I'm an optimist, I assume that once we follow the rules, etc., Mr. Granger, the kind of person he is, will act.
Which is a big assumption. You're assuming Barajagdir is the de facto controller of government policies. I mean, you said Barajagdir leads the PPP. The president is often allied with enormous state power. Is not an assumption wrong?
Everything in life is based on an assumption.
To assume this, Mr. Norton, no, Freddie, hold on.
Okay, sure.
I wonder, as a spin-off from that, have you sought the legal counsel to determine whether, let me put a scenario to you, if the PNC decides, or the leader of the list, or the representative of the list decides that they don't want the AFC there anymore, could they legally do it?
I'll put it this way, as I understand it, there was no AFC list, APNU list. There was an AFC, APNU list. And therefore the representation in Parliament is APNU, AFC.
So if I don't want 3, or we don't want 9 persons, and those 9 persons just happens to be AFC, could that be possible?
Could what be possible?
For recall,
The leader said we don't expect our 9 seats not to be we expect our 9 seats to be respected and observed. So there are 9 AFC parliamentary seats.
Listen to me.
You said that up to date.
You must agree that Kemraj has the right as the leader of the AFC to take a position on the matter. Just like that, I have a right as well. What I'm saying to you, I do not like preempting.
Thank you very much. I think you've answered the question. I want to ask you about David Granger. David Granger is all but disappeared out of the limelight after that elections 2020. Did you agree? Did you see that as presidential, as how a leader operate? And at a point in time when it was probably the darkest hour for the PNC, for the APNO AFC, that he just disappeared and nobody seems to be hearing from him. Your thoughts on David Granger?
Well, as far as I know, he does a program every Friday.
Public interest or something.
Public interest.
So he does it with himself, but addressing the people of Guyana.
Well, listen to me. Mr. Granger served us as leader. Mr. Granger did positive things, and Mr. Granger would have made mistakes. My task as leader is to look at the weaknesses of Granger and try to not make the mistakes that Granger would have made. And at the same time, utilize his strengths in the interest of the party to promote our interests. But put simply, as leader of this party, I'm not going to bash David Granger in public. Whenever you bash your leadership unnecessarily in politics, those same words will come back to haunt you in an
But you are not only a politician, you are an academic.
Yes.
Why can't you offer to viewers here an academic scholarly analysis of the paths David Granger took that you would not take?
Invite me to an academic conference and I'll give you a well-written paper on that issue.
So you can't take off the leader of the opposition hat right now and become a
It is
scholar.
not strategic. It's not strategic for me to take it.
I want you to invite him, right. But coming back to the
That's
2020
strategic.
elections, Mr. Norton, do you believe now, looking back for the last 2 years, that it was a mistake that the APNO FC made by not giving up those SOPs? It was very much ventilated, talked about. This is the ultimate test that to show that we won. Why was that never given? so it would clear the air. The second thing is you as a leader now, or wanting to be the leader of the PNC sometime along the way, or even a senior official within the APNO FC, did not say, look, I believe that we should do this and just clear the air to the Guyanese people. You not presenting those SOPs is a clear thing that you got something to hide.
No, I have a different view.
Thank you.
The law says whatever happened in an election, the challenges might go by way of petition. I support the party carrying the petition, and once the petition goes, everything that has to go with it.
But here is my list. The PPP presented their own. Here is my own, which is contradicting yours. Isn't that easy?
I thought it's much easier
Uh-huh.
and legal for us to have an election petition and allow whatever to come out in an
In
election.
the meantime, got the whole Guyanese people hanging.
The whole Guyanese people.
Do people owe it to them? The PPP went and they put it up there, which is, I think is very easy.
When they put it up, they had up a date before the election, We forget that. The election was the 2nd. When they put it up, I think they had the 30th or something like that. Go back and check it.
They had wrong figures up there.
The figures that they had up had a date before the election.
No, but all I'm just saying, hold on, Freddie.
Go back and check.
All I'm just saying,
on the website. Freddie, it was true.
No, but
back 28.
The point is not what they put up, is the fact that
That's not logistical.
you have, Freddie, hold on, Freddie. It's a very,
It happened, Freddie.
but all I'm just saying, you have your SOPs. Forget what the PPP put up there. I, Gildarie, belonging to the APNO FC, I want to prove to you, because you're asking me whether I won. This is the proof that I won. That's what I'm saying.
I am saying to you that the proof that we won the last election showed up clearly in the recount. And for me, once you the recount under Order 60,
observed by the GCOM, by the CARICOM officials. The CARICOM, I have the CARICOM report.
And what did they say?
They said that the dead people voting thing was a fishing expedition.
Listen,
you haven't read the...
Could you show me that in the CARICOM report? Let me tell you what the CARICOM report...
Of course I have it.
Hold on. The CARICOM report, first of all, made it clear that the list was a disaster and a problem, and that immediately after the election we should have dealt with the list. People seem to forget that. Now, the CARICOM report, there was an evaluation report. Let us not forget, when we agreed to go to a recount, we agreed to an evaluation report in which we will put everything from the evaluation report. At the end of the process, somebody decided that the evaluation report is no longer relevant. I want to ask you to let us look at the evaluation report, and when you look at the evaluation report, come back and tell me who would have won.
You are saying that the CARICOM report has an evaluation appendix that...
No. I'm saying Order 60 had a recount, then an evaluation, and after that there should have been this evaluation to determine what were valid votes or not. That is written in the order. What in essence happened as different international forces played out is that the very order was violated. And that is why we're saying, let the data from the election petition come, and we will know who won the last elections.
The data from the election petition, you have to provide. You have to provide your SOPs.
It is provided.
You have to provide the counter,
Freddie, let it come before the courts.
And he is prepared to show the SOPs. That's what he's saying.
And you will see the reality of the election. The driver is calling.
No, tell the driver hold on.
I mean, I give you an extra.
That's fine.
I was asking you didn't get to answer this question, and there's a couple more, and then we think. But this, I want to say thank you very much. I think you've been very frank. You have your own views. You did not, at least I didn't hear it. I wanted to know whether you have made any progress within the PNCR in diversifying and attracting more of the Indian votes, of the Amerindian votes?
We will only know that.
Thinking?
I put it this way: I've been in all communities, indigenous communities, Indians communities. We will know that when an election comes. I am meeting Indians.
But you are happy with what is happening?
Yes, I am, but I'm not totally satisfied. You could be happy and not totally satisfied.
Very good.
And in the new year, I intend to intensify the work in those communities.
Are we losing, and this has to do with oil and gas now, Mr. Norton, are we losing a golden opportunity while we are fighting among ourselves? Our oil profits are heading through the door, and that we're losing a good opportunity here for the opposition and the government to hold one hand or hold hands and says, look, we united against this. While we might be saying it, there seems to be some feeling as if the government is fully in charge without the opposition really saying, let's lock. Have you reached out to the government? Let us hear a little bit of that.
First of all, I would say this. Our objective is for the people of Ghana to benefit from oil and gas. And if the government is disposed to engage in so that we can get more out of Exxon, I am prepared to work with the government so that the Guyanese people benefit. But I want to warn, like I said before, merely working with the government wouldn't solve the problem. It's profit oil. Unless you put the institutional mechanisms in place to be able to monitor and audit so that you get an actual cost, I can very well end up working with the government and then end up in a bad shape because we lack the institutional capacity. Right now, I believe the government should have been training people to be able to audit oil, to be able to...
They're doing something at GRA there.
But listen to me. Let me know for myself. Freddie will tell you, we teach children multinational corporations and their behavior. They are very powerful, and to deal with them, you have to prepare. We're glad that we're getting oil and the benefits from oil, but we also want to protect Guyanese people and ensure they benefit. And that is, for me, the key thing.
Two questions before you make your statements. Are you in the near future going to be shaking hands with President Irfan Ali? And secondly, I want to offer you the possibility, either President Ali or Vice President Jagdeo, we could probably facilitate, because I know that intellectually you are very passionate about certain things, but let's say we offer to hold a debate, a discussion between the two of you on issues that are important.
We have to fight anytime, any place.
Anytime, any place.
I have no problem debating Barry Jagdeo.
We're talking about the studio here.
Anywhere, no, he's in anywhere.
Any place.
But you will come here with him as guest on the program.
No. Debating him and coming as a guest are two different things.
No,
Debate is a style.
Right.
You're looking at a forum.
Right.
You could debate him right here.
Listen to me. I believe that Barry Jagdeo has no successes to his tenure as president, or at least no major one. There are more failures. And I'm prepared anytime to debate Barry Jagdeo on Guyana, his contribution, and where we need to go.
Would you shake hands with the president?
Not until I am satisfied that the president is willing to deal with the issues that affect our constituency and must be dealt with.
But isn't that putting a condition that cannot be verified? Suppose he says, look, one can argue that your criterion is so evasive, so esoteric, that you are escaping your obligation. Or I could understand you saying, not until he cross the bridge, the Xanadu bridge, and talk to the people that he refused to talk to. But when you make this thing so broad, not unless he do the things for the people, the constituency I belong to.
But
I think seriously he's doing that.
Listen to me.
I think seriously, and the handshake is too petty, man, for someone
you
like
see,
you.
in your opinion, a handshake is petty. But
As opposition leader.
Well, let me finish that.
Yeah,
already.
sure.
Here is a man. Let me go back to Harman and to Corbyn. Over the years, the PPP has done one thing: engage the opposition, make everything looks hunky-dory and nice, and then they go to the PR and destroy the opposition leader. And before long, the very people that the opposition leaders representing starting to say they're selling out. I am not going to allow the PPP to engage me in these symbolicisms of shaking hand and we call it.
But isn't that counterproductive and a loss of opportunities?
It is not counterproductive. It is a form of bringing pressure to ensure that the issues that need to be addressed be addressed. I could shake your hand right now, and in the very process of shaking your hand, assigning with the other hand an order to destroy you. A shake hand is symbolic.
Those are assumptions you don't make.
A shake hand is a symbolicism of good friendly relationships.
No, it's a common human trait of innate human courtesy to each other. That's what it
Could
is.
I say this to you? Could I say this to you?
Yeah, you could say anything to me. We know each other a
I am
lifetime.
saying to you, Freddie, I add a little more to a shake hand in this circumstance. In fact, when I actually made the decision that I'm not going, I was over the river in Region 3, when an Indian man walked up to me and said, I must come and talk with them, and we went. I went. And he said he was thankful he got this land under the APNU, but they're attempting to take it away. He said he's fighting them in the court. He then proceeded to tell me that their access to the land is either through Wales Estate or through the back from Belwest, I think it is. And you know what the government did? They cut a drain so that they can attacking me, a dunce, a this, a that. And I'm not worried when people say I'm dunce. But the point is, these are issues that affect people. I am championing them. And unless I see some evidence of change, there's where the problem lies.
Thank you very much. Mr. Norton, as we wind down, we want to say that you have the opportunity. Christmas is on Sunday, and we have some holidays coming up. You have an opportunity to say to the Guyanese people what you want to say.
Well, all I would say to the Guyanese people at this stage is that I really hope that the resources of this country are used to improve the lives of the people of Guyana. I want to say to you that I'm committed to the development of Guyana in which all Guyanese benefit. I want to wish you a Merry Christmas, and we look forward to a Happy New Year.
Thank you very much.
Can I say something to you personally? Because I've known you so long. You still take your tips?
Yes, I do. You know, Freddie, I have never made a secret of it. I am one who socializes, and I don't drink during the day. I take a drink. Well, you know,
You shouldn't drink period.
at 6. Well, you know, a lot of people will say you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. I had a doctor friend, a late pharmacist, who used to say, Aubrey, you know, smoking is not good.
And he died before you.
Well, he was bigger than me. But the point is, it's one of my way of socializing, and I always historically like dancing and sporting. You know, I was criticized. I remember
Something with Bamba Mali.
the worst one was when I was in Essequibo and dancing and sporting and having a nice time. The PPP put it up. Now I see your finale trying to dance all around.
So you could dance, so you guys could win the dance competition.
Nobody could criticize
The
it.
dance
Just join me.
I can't dance at all, but the dance I would have liked to dance with my wife that I live terribly regretful of is the waltz. So you can waltz?
I can.
You can waltz?
I could, yeah, man.
Michael Carrington of the FCC is dubbed the best waltzer in Guyana.
Well, that's another question.
Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we want to say thank you very much to the leader of the opposition, Mr. Aubrey Norton, for being here, sharing his thoughts. Some of it definitely be quoted, and I know that you guys are going to be TikToking it. It is the way the world turns at the moment, but it is also good that we could be able to hear from him, to be able to know the character of the man and the character of other leaders within our country. We're hoping to bring our other leaders as well, and I'm going to encourage him to. Our studio, or the studio is open. We ask questions, but we want to see this country on a good path. We want to know who our leaders are. We want to know what our history. We want history to be recorded here through the eyes of different people. And of course, we're going to be back with you on Friday. I want to say it's good to have my co-host Freddie Kissoon, and it's also good to have the kind of discussion that we would have had here this evening. Thought-provoking at times, controversial at times, but this is what discussions are all about.
Especially if you have Martin and Freddie.
Martin and Freddie, and we're going to invite him back again and extend our invitations to leaders within the government. I hope to see a square off between Bar Jagdeo, Irfan Ali, and Aubrey Norton sometime, somewhere, and it has to be sooner than later. Ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are, good night, good evening, good morning. Have a safe journey home if you're traveling. Until then.